These past 2 weeks have been very entertaining when it comes to the whole podcast world, specifically for Andrew Schulz and the NELKBOYS with their Unreleased podcast episode. Now, we covered that from the start, but what is now shocking me is how crazy it became and how much it's blowing up online. The YouTube channels that uploaded the whole podcast or even clips got insane amount of views in under 10 days. I've been seeing a lot of clips on it on Instagram. And now some of the biggest podcasts are talking about it. But the ones we're looking at today are Brendan Schaub's appearance on Bradley Martin's podcast and Impaulsive, which is interesting because Bradley definitely knows Steiny. They're very close and have had arguments on air before. And although both of them kind of did try to defend Steiny, it is still Andrew Schulz getting all of the praise for that podcast episode. So let's get started.
You see Nelk and Andrew Schulz, speaking of like calling you a cheapskate over here.
Yep.
So I watched that podcast, and it's so interesting to me to see how that all went down with Steiny and Andrew Schulz. Did you see anything about it?
Yeah.
I did see it.
Man, that was brutal.
I love Andrew
He got
Schulz.
pulverized. It was
I
a
love
fun
Andrew
watch.
Schulz
It was
so
a fun,
much.
fun watch.
He goes, nah, that's what you should be doing. You're getting your moments.
Yeah,
Get your
yeah,
moment, champ.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that show was Andrew, you know, obviously the main core of the discussion is on Steiny. Everybody wants to talk about Steiny, about why the episode didn't air, so on and so forth. But Andrew, I don't think I've ever seen Andrew come to a show with that type of energy before.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Do you know the situation?
Yeah, I know there was some stuff that happened before the show.
No. Dude, Kyle has done an excellent job of building a brand. I've always had difficulty like vibing with him. I don't when he started a podcast, I thought how is he gonna do this? And they've done an incredible job and somehow stayed afloat. But when Andrew went on that podcast and said what he said during and after, I said to myself, how is this not the sentiment for every single show that they have?
Yeah. So I watched the whole thing. I watched from the beginning, and I think Kyle and Steve were very respectful right off the bat. Andrew,
No,
because I like Kyle. I've never found him to be like a talker.
I don't think
listen,
he. I don't
the only
think
person we're bullying here is Stein.
No, hold on,
Stein.
Jeff. Let me. I want to get the broom out for a second and work with you on this. Kyle is not claiming to have it's not a podcast. It's like you sit down with a bunch of homies and their show is very loose.
Homies together.
There
have been guests who have walked on this show where I hadn't heard of them until the day before the podcast.
Yeah.
And guess what I did? Significant amount of research, so I would make the guests feel welcome, appreciated, respected, and relevant on my show that I'm invited him on.
Yeah, but
not only that is like Andrew Schulz is
massive.
not just a guide. Like he's highly entertaining. He's very good at what he does.
Sharp
like,
from New York.
Come on.
Once again, it's so shocking how big this whole thing became, especially in the podcast world. I think it can be a case study or at the very least, a lesson that everybody could learn from, because I'm sure there's a lot of other podcasts that have unreleased episodes that will never, ever see the light of day. But what makes this one different is not only the buildup that was around it, but it's the fact that it wasn't really on the guest, but it was mostly on on one of the hosts for not doing his job and essentially preventing the episode from airing. So now when it comes to the Impaulsive podcast, we can actually kind of compare them to each other because they are direct competition. I mean, they have similar monthly views on their YouTube channels. They essentially have a similar setup with the mics, the couches, the aesthetics of the podcast. And Logan Paul has also started his own drink company and then filled up the studio with a bunch of prime bottles. And they also somewhat came up on the YouTube space in a similar way. So again, naturally, we can compare their performances. Now, for this example, we won't use Impaulsive's episode with Andrew Schulz because I think that's a little bit unfair. Instead, we can use Bobby Lee's most recent appearance on Impaulsive, who essentially made George Janko quit the podcast, or at the very least started that fire. Because even though when Bobby Lee was completely destroying one of the co-hosts, George Janko, Logan Paul and Mike, were still engaging with Bobby Lee, laughing, making jokes, which now looking back, I guess you could argue is, not the best thing to do to your friend.
Dude, you don't even have to know about his career to have a good conversation.
Well, that's
with
what
that guy.
no, but I believe that maybe that's what their sentiment was. We can roll into this lackadaisical, and regardless, it's Andrew Schulz. They could have sat on that couch and said, Andrew Schulz is going to steer this thing to 5 million views for us.
But
we have to
listen,
do nothing. I don't know what the reason was, but it was apparent from the start of that show that Andrew was not his normal, energetic, high vibrating self. He just doesn't
Steiny,
like.
you're
He
dead,
just, and by the way,
Listen, I really want to help Steiny in that situation because I think, he's a kid from Canada. He didn't know what he was getting into. All of a sudden, you're interviewing Elon Musk. He's getting thrown in
That
this
is
thing
crazy.
with
That's
a
crazy.
New York comedian that
Yeah.
literally, he looks at people like that, he wants to tear them apart.
Yeah.
what did Andrew say about Steiny? He said he has had. He
broke him down.
He said one statement which was insane. He said he's had the longest.
I don't think anybody has gone further in entertainment with less talent than this kid. So it's like, I'm like, where?
Unwarranted run for someone with no talent that he's ever seen in his entire life. Talent is not indicative or representative of success in this environment anymore. It's not. It is how many, and that's not me agreeing and saying that Steiny is talentless. I don't care if he has talent or not. This is an unbiased point right here. If you can drive viewership and clicks and controversy, you are doing what needs to be done in this current internet climate.
Now, I understand that Mike has to give a different perspective or a different take, but the way that they try to defend Steiny here just seems like a lazy attempt to do that, exactly, to just give a different take. Because what he's essentially saying was that Andrew Schulz wasn't himself, his normal self, and wasn't as hype to be with the NELKBOYS, which is just the worst take ever. If you rewatch the podcast, you could even argue that Andrew Schulz was carrying the entire show, the entire episode, for the first 45 minutes, making jokes, while everybody didn't react to them, telling stories, ranting, doing those passionate rants that he does and whatever. And nobody was engaging him. And they completely missed the fact that, 45 minutes in, Steiny was texting on his phone, ignoring what Andrew Schulz was saying. And also what's interesting is that this kind of makes their ex-co-host, George Janko, look less bad. Because when he was getting completely mopped and roasted by Bobby Lee, at the very least, he was just kind of sitting there. He looked out of it and like he was defeated, but at least he wasn't, making it all about him and asking Bobby Lee why he had gone after him for no reason and turning it into a therapy session. When he finally snapped, he walked away, which I think I kind of respect more than, if he would have stayed and then told Bobby Lee that they could have the conversation off the mic. By the way, if you like what you're seeing so far, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps out so much, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And then so it's funny because there was a clip where we were talking about Schulz, like as we were walking in here. There was a clip where Schulz was like roasting Nelk for the pod, I guess, because like Steiny, like he went really hard on Steiny, and like they didn't release the pod. Then they finally released the pod. So there's this whole like clip where like he's like, "Are you guys even friends?" and all this shit. And I replied to it because Schulz was like, he basically was like, this felt awkward. He's like, "Oh, Brad's normally on this podcast. Is like, is he the person who like normally drives it and stuff?" And then I jumped in and was like, "But to be honest, like, who wins in a street fight, me or Andrew Schulz?" Did you see the content with Schulz and Steiny? We didn't really talk much about it.
No,
Did you see it?
I just saw
like there was a
clip
pod
and I heard Schulz talking about it on his pod. Schulz is one of my favorite pods, Flagrant.
Yeah, the reason why I think I watched the clip where he was like kind of like roasting Steiny for like whatever the pod went, and Schulz is like, does he have a degree in like psychology or something like that?
He's just a smart motherfucker. That's what makes him such a great comedian. Like he's very, very smart. But I think too with what's his name, Steiny. I think he felt like Steiny feels unauthentic, if that makes sense. Like inauthentic.
Unauthentic. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was just like he was reading that, and then Steiny was like texting while Schulz was talking. So he's like, "Oh, fuck this, dude."
Yeah.
And then he seemed like he was playing a character. And then he said on his pod, he was like, Steiny doesn't, like, he's done the most with the least talent I've ever seen.
He's a hustler, dude.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a reason why he's there. I don't know those boys at all. I've never seen the show. I don't know them. So,
And Andrew Schulz did have a point there because although I'm not a huge Bradley Martin fan, he definitely does do a way better job at podcasting or at talking than the NELKBOYS by far. And it also still shocks me seeing Brennan Schaub essentially praising Andrew Schulz for being the smartest and having the best podcast out there. you know, especially after everything that happened between them. Because I think we all know that Andrew Schulz would probably never say that about Brendan Schaub, but I think it's a good way to cover yourself from any other future beef. And he does bring up the texting, which is a good point because that is what made Andrew Schulz mad. A lot of people were arguing, commenting that texting while doing a podcast with friends is not that big of a deal, and I'm not going to get into how dumb that take is. He told Steiny to his face that he was annoyed because he was texting and everyone else seemed uninterested in what he was saying.
I don't know if he's talented or not, but he seems like he's doing something right. But when Schulz smells that, and then you're also talking about a high level professional comedian who's gonna tear into you,
But he did-
and psychoanalyze you too, so he's gonna destroy you, man.
Yeah, because he I'm not gonna lie, like it was funny to me because like I know Steiny and like
He's a good dude.
he's a good dude. He's a good dude. He has shitty moments, but overall I think he's a good dude. I think he's
What's
just
the
trying
knock on him? Like, it has to be a talented dude if he's at that level. I
he's
assume.
definitely talented. Definitely
At what?
talented. At hustling, at talking.
That's
he's
a
good.
talent, yeah.
He's definitely a talented guy. But it's funny because when Schulz said about his character, there are times like where I know that like because he'll play the victim a lot. Like with me, he'll try to like bully me and then get a reaction because it's funny for a clip, and I get it because like I understand the value of that.
Yes.
Like the big guy getting mad and shit. I think he's gotten better since then, but I definitely know like I've had moments with him where I'm like, I know you're doing this like just to get a reaction, like because Steiny off camera is similar to that guy, but not that
He's
guy.
like heightened version. But there's that, but I think too with comics too, it's like all we do is specialize in reading people. So if he smells, you know what I'm saying? So then he lights him up.
Well, he lit him up though in a way that was like, I'll be honest, was kind of not funny. Meaning like it was so spot on.
Schulz can be mean, yeah.
Like he just kind of, it almost like removed the comedy and was like, I'm calling you out. Like do you remember that? You saw it? That's what I'm saying. Like, it was funny to me because I know Steiny and I know
he's taking
Schulz.
a page out of Rogan's book. Rogan's the same way where if he sees, he calls you out and it's uncomfortable.
And it's funny because Logan Paul and them on Impaulsive were kind of saying the same thing, trying to defend Steiny, basically saying that it's not really about talent, but instead of, you know, it matters if you can drive views and bring in views, which it's fair. I get that. I understand. And I've also said that about Steiny. You know, I've given him credit, basically saying that on paper, he is very successful. You know, he's part of a massive podcast show and continues to be on it. They haven't kicked him out. He has interviewed some of the most powerful people in the world, has a successful Instagram account with over like 1.3 million followers, but also it's not rocket science. Sure, you do need some communication skills and some social awareness to, you know, to be able to be in his position, but also to say that he must be doing something right, I think it's a little bit of a stretch because sure, he is at the right place, met the right people, and is pulling it off. He's doing extremely well, but you also have to consider that all the massive podcast episodes that they've had are mainly because they have massive guests on. And although the massive Unreleased podcast episode involved him, it was mainly because of who the guest was and the fact that it was Andrew Schulz. Because if it would have been somebody else, a random guest, or not a random guest, but somebody else, another guest that got into a fight with Steiny, I don't think people would care that much. I know I wouldn't care, but because it was Andrew Schulz, you know, the flagrant Andrew Schulz that went at Steiny so bad that Steiny didn't want the episode out. It was just a perfect recipe for success, and it really was. But it's been very interesting seeing everything unfold and how everyone in the podcast business is reacting to it because, again, it's a perfect example of what not to do or maybe what to do if you want to potentially market an unreleased podcast episode because I don't think they did it on purpose, but if they did, it was a genius move. Again, I would be giving them way too much credit, but it's pretty shocking how this whole thing ended up turning out. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like, subscribe to support the channel. Follow me on Instagram if you want to connect. Dislike if you didn't like the video. But that is all we have for today. See ya.